Welcome to the Occult Rejects. In this episode, we got an alchemist with us, and we're gonna be getting practical with one of those techniques that people talk about in occult circles all the time, but nobody really gets, nobody really explains it too well, or not too clearly, and that is fluid condensers. My guest is Aerik if I say this right, Arkadian.
You got it.
All right, an occult author and teacher who works at the crossroads of music, myth, and magic. He's publicly described as a third-degree Gardarian high priest, a coven leader, a Reiki master, and a working musician audio engineer. And he's also known for teaching and writing about how occult technique can be made usable, not just mysterious. Aerik has a book coming out called Fluid Condensers, Unlocking the Mysteries of Gold, Alchemy, and Magic. And this isn't just a vibe book or a glossary. It's positioned as a hands-on manual. What fluid condensers are, where the idea comes from, why gold matters in the magical logic of the work, and how a practitioner can actually build, charge, and apply them for real-world aims without the usual fog and gatekeeping that surrounds the topic. But before we introduce Aerik, let's introduce the Loon. What is going on, Judith? How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. I look forward to our discussion, Aerik, and you could catch me on YouTube and on X as the Loon.
Awesome, thank you very much. And Aerik, sir, please let everybody know. I guess whatever I might have left out, if there's anything you want to promote, any websites or anything, please let people know what's up with you.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's great to be here. And I am Aerik Arkadian. You can find me online pretty much anywhere there's social media, including YouTube, at Aerik Arkadian, or you can go to my website, erikarkadian.com. I run a show also very similar format to this called Music, Myth, and Magic, where I reach out and interview people too. So it's kind of fun to be on this side of things, but you can check that show out also on YouTube. But, you know, whatever you read from my bio is legit, but you know, the titles and stuff aside, I like to write, I like to make music, and I'm a practicing witch. So my wife and I run a coven here locally in West Palm Beach, where we live, and we're pretty active in the pagan community. We like to get involved in stuff, go to festivals, teach classes, do workshops, that kind of stuff.
Very nice. Nice, man. That's awesome. And Florida, obviously, right?
Yep.
Nice. It's such an active place for like podcasts and stuff like that.
It's a lot of witches here.
Yeah, like even that, or it's like, believe it or not, it'd be a huge Bigfoot community I know out there too.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I know a lot of people from podcasting into Bigfoot, and like there's just so many of them in Florida. But I mean, I guess that's the place if you want woods to get lost in and look for Bigfoot. You know, swamps and all that shit. But yeah, it just seems like a happening place right about now for a lot of media and occultism.
Yeah, you could say happening. I mean, there's a lot of not so pleasant things going on here too.
Sure,
Just like anywhere else in the country.
Yeah. Same question that I give all of my occult guests, which is pretty much all of them now. When did you find yourself getting into this stuff? Like, how did you realize, oh, I'm going to make a life of this?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
How did I make that decision?
You can take as much time.
I mean, I won't go like all the way back, but I was raised in a really, really conservative Christian household. So we were at church all the time. I mean, when I say conservative, I mean like, there was a really conservative church in the area that my parents used to take me to. That wasn't conservative enough. So there was a guy from that church who left to start an even more conservative church, and my parents went with him to start this new church. So as a kid, I was just in this like really small church group of people, mostly adults, nobody really my age. And that was the influence I got from religion and finding God at a really young age. And that stuff did not really sit well with me. And I started to ask questions, and I was told I wasn't allowed to ask questions, right? And I was asking the wrong questions and constantly threatened by going to hell if I was asking the wrong question. So at some point, and I'm going to say it was like a pretty significant factor in this was actually, believe it or not, science fiction. Because when you take a social or moral issue and you have it apply to aliens or whatever, you don't upset the status quo. And I could look at science fiction shows and I could see moral issues like abortion or gender identity that were being dealt with, but it was aliens dealing with it, right? And I would be able to watch it and say, I disagree with that, because it wasn't the same as applying that lesson from the Bible to humanity. So I watched these shows and I realized that the stuff I was agreeing with morally from those shows directly conflicted with the lessons that I was being taught about morals at church. And I didn't really know how to rectify that. So I kind of went on a big spiritual quest and I looked at other religions. I pieced together what I believed felt right for me. And when I put it all under an umbrella, it eventually just kind of fit under Wicca or witchcraft. And I thought, okay, well, I'll do that. So I did that. I joined a coven. I tried to make everything as official as possible. I went through the degrees and training, and here I am.
Nice. All right.
I have a question for you. Growing up in a conservative Christian household, were you able to make a comparison to how, because I know I grew up Catholic, so I understand what you're saying about if you question, it's frowned upon. Didn't you find it ironic? Because technically, if you look at Jesus, he questioned and he was ridiculed as well.
Yeah, I mean, I love a lot of the teachings of Jesus. Jesus was a dope dude, right? It's not that's not where the problem is. Like, he had some really good lessons to teach people, and then we took all those lessons and we corrupted them and we made them about war and power and money and control. So
yeah, that's a pretty good way to say it. Do you have anything else, Judith? I'm sorry, I didn't know.
I was about to say it's ironic because that's what people miss, is that criticism that they have was the same criticism that they went through, but yet it's still the same, which pushes many of us away and leads us into the occult, and probably led you to doing taking a deep dive into alchemy itself.
Yeah, I mean, that was like, it almost felt kind of a little circular when that happened. The alchemy practice and beliefs didn't come for me until later. But if you go back to a lot of the alchemical texts from like a long time ago, a lot of alchemists were very Christian, or they at least were writing about very Christian ideals or a very Christian conceptualization of God and creator in their writings.
All right. I did want to add, you mentioned stuff about Wicca too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, that might be a topic I have you back on instead of actually getting into it too much here. What was it that I guess for me, I'm thinking for myself, like, what would I have been into that brought me into actually starting to do alchemy with condensers and stuff? Like what I guess what were you kind of like into at the time when that seemed to be an idea? Like, what were you practicing? What were you studying? I'm saying that led you to even getting into that.
So it was definitely traditional witchcraft that I was practicing and studying at the time. And I happened to come across a recipe for a magic mirror, which was part of making the magic mirror was to apply the fluid condenser. Did not say what a fluid condenser was or how to make it. It was just kind of like that knowledge was assumed that you already had that knowledge. And so I kind of started trying to find other sources for where I could learn about fluid condensers. And there's not a lot out there. There's not a lot. And there are places that it's mentioned, but it hasn't ever really been fully expanded on or defined. And
My next
as
question
I was studying to try to figure out all this stuff and how to work with it, that's kind of what led me into alchemy, because they're very, the methodology and the methodologies, they're very intertwined, the logic and the thinking.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, I've been in a lot of like ceremonial magic. I've gotten into some grimoires, but when I was like kind of like, I guess like I incorporated kind of like Wicca into my ceremonial magic stuff. I'm a it was in the OTO Thelemite, so I guess it's not too far off. Yeah, I really never. I had one time. I had never thought about ever getting into alchemy like you were, but at one time I had thought about it when I was kind of like more into that, and I was just like, you know how cool it would be to make my own oils and shit. You know what I'm saying? I was like, it'll probably save me money after a while after I buy this stuff, and it'll be better because I had like a good connection with like organic, like bulk herbs. So I was like, oh, I could just start fucking making tons of this shit myself. So that's interesting. How you say kind of like the same thing in a sense. Well, you know. Next question, you kind of started getting into it. I guess for people who don't know what it is, and I'm not really even completely sure, can you tell us what a fluid condenser is?
Yeah. So my definition in the book, the way I define it, is that a fluid condenser is a substance that has a high capacity or high capability to conduct energy between planes. So like we're talking moving from the astral to the physical plane. It's something that kind of collectively we have found through experimentation, or just we've largely agreed that these things work well in magic. So traditionally, that's like an herbal solution or something that you prepare from a number of different things. But going back alchemically, then we have things like the planetary metals all the way up to gold.
I do have a question. The methods used, because it sounds more like if you are, would it be similar to what people would use for, let's say, distilling? If they're home brewing, or if I think you mentioned it before we came on, using an HVAC type situation. That's going more into electrical and conducting, but is that along those lines?
I mean,
I like that thinking. That's really good.
Alchemy, like when you take a look at alchemy and you define it in its simplest form, it's been stated that alchemy is the raising of vibrations. And so what you're talking about kind of like with distillation is refinement of a substance, right? So when you distill, you're boiling and it condenses the gas and it drips down and it cools. And what you get at the end is something that's a little bit purer of a substance than what you started with. And that's the idea behind it, is that you keep repeating that process until you wind up with something that is the most pure, right? Or the best you can get. With the typical preparation of a fluid condenser, we're not really going to be using any of that laboratory equipment. We might just be boiling a solution of herbs to kind of take the essence out of the herbs. But we are applying those same principles spiritually and mentally and energetically of refinement to the work that we're doing.
Nice. I didn't know there was a difference. So thank you for explaining that, sir. Judith, do you have anything else? What is the biggest misconception you think with this stuff? If there is one for you.
Well, I mean, I had some major misconceptions when I first
That's what
started out, right? Because and that's kind of like one thing just led to another thing, and that's probably why I ended up writing about it so much. First of all, when I thought I was imagining what a fluid condenser would be, I was imagining basically like what you were talking about, like a home brew setup for making beer or something like that, like some sort of like condensing coil that was collecting a fluid of some type. But this terminology has nothing to do with what a fluid condenser actually is. So the fluid is etheric fluid or source energy or whatever you want to call it. It actually goes back to this guy, Franz Mesmer, a few hundred years ago, who, if you've ever heard the term mesmerize, this is the guy, this is why we call it that. So he worked with this thing called animal magnetism, and he believed that there was this invisible fluid everywhere that kind of like connected and permeated all living things, and that a trained practitioner could manipulate the fluid and have some sort of control or impact over things. Now, he had almost like a cult following of the mesmerists, and they did some wacky things, like they had people swallow magnets and like for stomach pain, and they would try to manipulate the magnets in their stomach, and a lot of things that Mesmer stood for were kind of disproven. But you got to remember, at the time, we didn't have the science that we have today, and they were trying to quantify or qualify these etheric things, and they were trying to slap labels on it. So they eventually started calling this the electromagnetic fluid, even though it really has nothing to do with electromagnetism. But this is essentially source energy or ether, or the summation of the elements, if you want to put it in like modern witchcraft terms. It's just the power behind everything. And it's being able to manipulate that and conduct that energy. You could call it plasma, I guess, if you wanted, but it's just kind of out there in the ethers. It's magic. So that was one misconception. Probably the biggest misconception for me. And then another misconception that I would have had, I guess, just would have been that the process of making them was totally physical, when in fact, everything has to undergo a energetic and a mental and a spiritual process for it to work. Just like any sort of ritual or a magical thing that you're participating in. If you go to a ritual and you're going through the motions and you're not thinking through what you're doing, you're not really going to have an effect, right? But at the beginning, I did think it was just kind of a physical process that things were going through.
I do have a question. You said France, I think, Miser? You said he was disproven. How so?
Not like a direct disproving, but it was more, I want to say it was more of like a cult following, and just they were doing such weird stuff with people, like swallowing magnets and stuff like that, that it kind of lost its popularity. It's not like anybody had some sort of scientific equipment set up where they did an experiment. They were like, no, this does not exist. I've disproved that. But I think Mesmer, what he did contribute, and I think it probably influenced a lot of the different occult and magical groups at the time, probably filtered down to like the Golden Dawn, the Rosicrucians, and people like that was that idea of the invisible fluid permeating matter. And that was taken up by later people like Franz Barden and a couple other writers who then kind of expanded on the idea of fluid condensers.
Thank you. You got anything else, Judith?
I do have a question. Did you put together an actual physical spirit condenser, or is there a method you use to, how can I say?
I have a bunch. One within reaching distance. I mean, you know, it doesn't look like much. It's just, this one is just an herbal solution. So the simple method of making a fluid condenser is, so like probably the easiest recipes that most of the older teachers would write about in their books is a solution of chamomile, water, distilled water, and some type of representation of gold. And then you take all of that and you add either blood or sexual fluids to it. So the gold, I was always thinking, like, why are we adding gold to this stuff? And the gold is representative of the ideas of alchemy, because in alchemy, gold is the most pure, the most refined, the most spiritually intense substance that we can have. So you don't actually have to like put real gold in it. You can put the idea of gold in your fluid condenser, but traditionally we use a substance called gold chloride, which is a photography chemical that they use for film developing, but it's essentially gold melted down in an acid and then diluted so that it's not, doesn't like burn through stuff.
Okay.
I had a couple of questions I want to ask you. There was something you said now that I kind of wanted to ask, but not yet. When it comes to alchemy, just a quick question. Because it's for like, I've covered other alchemists on the show, like older people, and there are some that even though they seem to kind of like get into it, like I guess the way you'd read it, you would think they're talking about possible, like, you know, stuff like contraptions or whatever, equipment, but they're technically actually talking about spiritual alchemy. Do you believe in that as well, or do you look at it just as this way?
So just to kind of expand on what you're saying, I see that there's two branches of alchemy. There's the practical or laboratory alchemy, in which you are actually like doing science experiments. And then there's the spiritual alchemy, which is all like how you're thinking about stuff. And I say, like, I'm 90, this practice that I'm talking about, I don't know how it's coming across right now, but it's like 99% spiritual alchemy. Yeah, you're making you're boiling herbs on your stove. All the stuff I do can be done in the kitchen. There's nothing complicated about it. It's just the things you're thinking about. And I'm totally into the spiritual side of alchemy. I mean, I would love to get into the more practical laboratory side of things if one day I had a lab in my house and I had a few $1,000s of equipment to invest in, but that's just not practical for everybody to do. But I think that, and this is of course my opinion, can't prove it or disprove it either way, but I think that most of the alchemical texts, they were using all of that procedure as a guise to write about the spiritual side of things, if that makes sense. And they were encoding that in a way like that people could look at and they wouldn't be murdered for saying these things. Like, oh yeah, we're just trying to make gold over here. And the king's like, all right, I like that. I like gold, right? We can all use more gold. and really they're working on spiritual and self mastery and stuff like that. So that's kind of where that was another misconception, I think, for me too, is that I thought alchemy was just physically about trying to make gold. And I always laughed it off and I thought it was ridiculous. And it was actually kind of hard for me to get into it when I was studying and trying to find out more about fluid condensers, because I kept having that, like, this is stupid. I'm not actually going to make like physical gold out of lead. That's ridiculous. But the spiritual side of it is just so powerful. And once you finally feel it, I don't know, everything just kind of makes more sense.
Nice. Where have you, I know you kind of mentioned it earlier before. Is there any like maybe examples that you can give us where fluid condensers have come up in the past and stuff and like works and or other people?
Yeah, Franz Barden, huge. He wrote Initiation into Hermetics in like the earlier, I don't know, 1940s, maybe. If you're not familiar with that book, extremely influential to how we think about modern Western occult practice today. Barden was kind of like the first guy that took a lot of quote, quote, Eastern ideology and merged it with Western technique for magic. So he's got a few books out there that are super influential. And he's probably like the number one source if you try to trace anything back.
Thank you. And then the other question I kind of had to follow up on that. Not saying that these people may be, but why do you think maybe this idea was so poorly explained in the past?
So it's difficult to figure out where things come from, right? Especially around this time in magical writing. Now we write books and we quote and we cite everything where we took ideas from, right? Because we'll get sued if we don't do that. But 100 years ago, 200 years ago, when like the modern witchcraft movement started, everybody was just writing books and saying it was their own idea and they were just copying from somebody else. And there's like 4 or 5 different people. I might be going kind of on a tangent here, but I feel like I'm answering questions. There's like 4 or 5 different people, really, really well-known authors from the start of the witchcraft movement that mentioned fluid condensers, and they gave a recipe for a fluid condenser, and they kind of presented it as their own idea. These include Scott Cunningham, Sybil Leek, and a few other people. So I think it's in Scott Cunningham's Natural Magic. I think that's the book that it's in. But here's the funny thing. The ingredients they use are really, really specific, like cucumber seeds, violet flower, tobacco leaves, and a few other things. It's just, they are words that you don't see next to each other very often. So if you go and if you Google those words, the only other place they ever come up is in Initiation into Hermetics by Franz Barden. As far as I can tell, it's actually his recipe that people ripped off, and nobody really credited him for that. They were just like, this is a cool thing that I came up with, until probably like the 90s. And then we started citing our sources a little bit better. Like Christopher Penczak talks about fluid condensers too. He goes through a little bit of Barden's methodology and actually talks about where it came from, so that was a source that was helpful for me when I was first writing my book too. But I think they're just mentioned so infrequently, and when they are, a lot of times with this kind of stuff, it's sometimes assumed there was an oral transmission of knowledge as well. So you would have already been familiar with what that is. You read it in the book, you see the fluid condenser. Well, you've already been taught by someone, maybe as like a mentor, mentee, magical relationship, and you already know what that is. So they don't have to define it in the book.
So basically this information was given from teacher to student.
Traditionally, that's how we think alchemy was passed down.
Would you credit alchemy to the way we move forward in science? Because the way you're explaining it, it has application within electrical training, HAZVAC training, and everything else. And it sounds like when you're applying this, which I'm going to ask you, how would you apply this? I am. But when you're applying this, it almost appears as if you are conducting a science experiment.
I can feel that. And the way that, like, when I do workshops on fluid condensers, the way that I usually open is by saying, imagine that I have a light bulb and a battery, and I want to turn on the light bulb. Like, how do I connect the two? Everybody knows I'm going to use a piece of copper wire to connect those two, right? Because copper is a good conductor of the type of energy that we want to conduct, which here is electricity. And yeah, it does kind of have that sciencey vibe to it. It does kind of feel like a science experiment going on. But then I think that helps us open our minds and understand how fluid condensers work, because then what we're going to do is take the light bulb and move it to the astral plane. So now you have to imagine that there's a light bulb in the astral plane, and we have to connect the battery to the light bulb from physical to the astral plane. How are we going to do that? This is what we use a fluid condenser for, because this is something that can conduct energy all the way from source down to here in the physical realm. It's like an anchor point for magic, if that makes sense.
Actually, it does, which leads me to another question, and I'm sorry. The other question is, okay, back in Renaissance time, it was big to try to turn lead into gold. If you apply that spiritually, what does that mean to you on a spiritual plane?
I think that just means constant self-improvement. I mean, it does not necessarily have to be something intangible as a goal, but when we think of spiritual gold, that's like the best we could be spiritually here on this earth, right? So there's a lot of growth and work that I want to undergo. I wouldn't say like I'm gold right now, like that might be the end result of my quest in this life is to get closer to that. But it's spiritual refinement, and there's also psychological aspects of it too, like dealing with the bad parts of you and being a more balanced person. And when we throw the word alchemy on it, it seems like it's something really far out there. But when you reduce it down to the simplest parts of what we're trying to accomplish, it is just improving oneself.
Thank you. I was just thinking before. It was something because of what you had mentioned, and in my opinion, I do think maybe some occultists might have scammed people in high positions to maybe live a better life and be able to do what they want, to try to figure out what's going on, in their stuff. Do you ever wonder if maybe the idea of turning stuff to gold was what was told to the person and possibly they made fake gold to try to get away with it?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And like literally they weren't doing that, but like what you said, they said that they were doing that to cover up maybe them trying to have a magical experience.
Well, I think there was a mix of factors at play, and so like covering it up was probably one aspect of it. But then there's also recipes, and I think they go back all the way to ancient Egypt on making things look like gold.
Yeah, that's why I asked,
and they could take like a less pure metal. I mean, you can do an experiment like this with a penny, and you coat it. I think you coat the penny in zinc, and then you apply heat to the penny, and the zinc turns gold. It's not gold by the periodic table of elements, but it looks like gold, right? And so, but they had no way of knowing this thousands of years ago, right? Because they were making something that looked like gold, shined like gold, was malleable like gold, probably conducted like gold, felt, for all intents and purposes, felt like gold, but it wasn't actually gold. It just looked like it was. So I think there was that element. It's not like they had like mass spectrometry or gas chromatography where they could actually take a chemical and identify it for exactly what element it was, but it looked like gold to them. And they probably, a lot of people thought they were making gold.
Yeah, no, I just wondered that. I was like, if you know what you're doing with that stuff, you could probably fake it, because I mean, who's to say I doubt they had as many techniques as they did now to tell if gold's real or not.
Yeah, definitely not.
I mean, fool's gold may have been gold until it was found out it wasn't real. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was just an interesting idea that came across my head as we're talking now. Something I did want to ask you though after that, if you could think of three, because I was going to ask you if you could give me top three beginner mistakes that you think that ruins results, or if you get one or two, that'd be three.
Yeah. Okay.
Or so you could even maybe go by yourself. Mistakes you've made.
I'll go with my top mistakes. Right. There's this idea in alchemy that when you're working with an alchemical substance, like you have to be pure, right? Like pure, but it's not like the biblical Christian purity. It's like what it's really talking about is purity of mind and mindset and intention, because the substances that you're working with, even when we're making fluid condensers, they're extremely receptive to ideas and to energy. So if you go in and you're making something, it takes you an hour to make, but you're arguing with somebody while you're doing it, or you have really angry, you're upset, you have really negative vibes. Well, all that stuff is going to infect your work that you're doing, right? And it's going to ruin it. And so there's like some ridiculousness when you read the old alchemical text. There's like ridiculousness surrounding the idea of purity. Just kind of like, also when you read something like the Key of Solomon, right, and it tells you like this implement can only be handled by a virgin child, or like you have to take 7 baths before you do something like that, because like there's this idea of like proper mindset going in. But with alchemy and fluid condensers, it's really just about not bringing in a bad vibe that's then going to stay permanent with the thing that you're creating. So that was a big one for me, to understand. And then the unfortunate thing is you don't really see the effects until much later, because you're making the thing, you're making the fluid condenser, you're not using it right that second. You're saving it. That's a spell ingredient for next week, next month, or next year, right? So you don't you don't necessarily see that it's not working at first. I will keep thinking of misconceptions and mistakes that I have made as we keep talking, but that was the first one that came to mind.
All right. Judith, anything?
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask you. You said you had Wiccan practices. So did those practices help you along this line?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely they did. Because a lot of magical practices, they're really just trying to accomplish the same thing. And they are framing things through a slightly different lens and maybe a slightly different technique, but we're trying to get to the same end result most of the time, right? So through witchcraft, British traditional witchcraft in my practice there, I learn about correspondence systems, how the 4 elements work, how the planets work, how the zodiac works, how all of this applies to herbs and crystals and metals, and how all of these things are related. And this is exactly the type of correspondences that I use in fluid condensers to create things.
My next question is, because I know it's strictly alchemy, but do you see the conductors as a shortcut or an assistance?
No, I don't see them as a shortcut. I just think that they give your magic some oomph. And it's something you can use as an ingredient that makes the thing that you're doing all the more powerful. And outside of that, when you understand the thinking and the mental processes that are going into the creation of these things, you can really apply that to just about every act of magic or transformation that you then do in the future outside of this type of practice.
Unfortunately, because I had to go run to the bathroom real quick, I didn't hear that question. I don't think I'll be asking the same one. But I was wondering, it's almost started to sound like it was going in that area. You mentioned like planetary stuff before.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to do your stuff, do you use the timing of the moon, or you use planetary hours, anything like that? Because I'm thinking going back to like, Wicca or witchcraft or other stuff. Sometimes they do use that. So I was wondering, at least the moon cycle, very big. So.
Yeah. So my big thing is be aware of what's working sympathetically for you and be aware of what's working against you at any particular moment. You don't have to use all of the different elements of timing, because I need something now, not when the moon is full in Cancer during the hour of Mars on the day of Saturn that happens in 2 years, right? Like, I need it now. So we can use those currents of energy as best we can in any present moment. But if something is especially set up in the universe to, like, that is contrasting to the type of energy we're trying to raise, we should be aware of that, because maybe that means it's better to wait. Maybe that means we have to put some extra energy in it to go against the current. Or maybe it means we kind of need to recalculate and redesign what we're doing. But the best answer to that question is sometimes, when it's convenient.
All right, gotcha. Yes, yeah, as a ceremonial magician, not saying that like you're not into that, but for me, I would have mind fucked the shit out of that. I would have had to do a lesser banishing ritual at a certain time, planetary hours, all that crap. Yeah.
No, I get that. I get that. And I can totally get into that headspace where I feel like I have to have all the things align for me. But then at the same time, I do like my magic to be more practical. And I get down to kind of that vibe, you know. And if something works out and it's convenient, that's great. I'll wait for it. If it's within the week or a couple weeks and I can get that planetary alignment. But if that's not going to happen, well, like I said, you know, it's like being hungry. Are you going to wait 2 weeks to eat? Yeah. Or are you just going to do the best you can do and throw together the meal that you can take tonight?
Yeah. You had mentioned that before about you said the meal you have tonight. I was gonna make a joke before saying why do you think grandma's food tastes so well? Because she makes it with love. You're going on about before about kind of influencing stuff, you know, in a bad headspace or in a bad, you know, whatever things are going on. So yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to repeat that. One thing I was fuck, I forgot the question I was going to ask just now. It was something about what you were saying with the timing. Oh yeah, for me though too, I also understand that sometimes it's never happened to me, or at least not. I guess maybe I just don't look at certain things for using magic on, even though you could use it for anything. I've never thought like, oh fuck, I got to do a spell right now. But I do understand the value of being able to do that, because if you're going to base everything on the moon and then the planets, like you could be screwed. You'd be like, oh well, I got to wait till 3 days from now anyway. You know what I'm saying? If I want to do it that way. So obviously, I don't believe you do. It could help, I guess, but no, I understand being able to do that. And I think there is value in being able to do both. You know. Judith, did you have anything before I ask any more questions?
No, I'm good right now.
Okay, all right. What does transformation mean in your work? Like psychology, spirit, fate, environment, or like all of the above?
I think there's a lot of aspects to it. I mean, we could say all of the above, right? But psychologically, there are some really big factors, and just one of the things, for whatever reason, you're asking me this question, like confronting the shadow self is what's coming to my mind. I think probably because that is a theme that you can see through alchemy, or alchemy viewed through like Jungian psychology, and also in modern magical practices, and also just as something that like we need to do as humans. If there's this thread between all those things, is confronting the shadow self, and a lot of improvement and bettering of oneself, I think, involves a lot of that type of work.
Yeah, I like that answer though. Confronting oneself. Yeah, transformation. I definitely think you'll, if you do something when you confront yourself, yeah, I think you'll get some transformation out of that for sure. And I do, again, I guess that would go back to, you know, again, not to put it in two different categories, but that would be spiritual alchemy in a sense for me.
Yep, totally.
Yeah, yeah. Atlas, what is going on, sir? How are you?
How you doing? I thought it was 8:30. I'm sorry.
No, it's quite all right. So it's quite all right. Well, then you're actually early.
Oh, yeah.
Technically for you.
All right.
That's great.
Another alchemist here. I just had a couple questions about meditation and the tools of alchemy. Because I've noticed that when you're going through the old alchemical literature, they always talk about how you're supposed to be meditating on different images and icons to help you sort of focus on the work. But what I've also found in my own alchemical practice is that the tools themselves have to be thought through, right? And that thinking through these different stages and material transformations is part of the meditative process when it comes to performing the actual art of alchemy. Do you kind of have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think we were kind of talking a little bit about this earlier, is the mindset that needs to go behind all these different things. And the fact that, alchemy is so symbolic of a practice, and we talk about it as a very literal practice, i.e., turning lead into something that is not lead, but it's very symbolic. And the way that we incorporate those symbols is a lot of it is through meditation or mindset and thinking through the things that we're going to do.
Absolutely. And I think when people are, because all the ancient alchemists had to craft their own tools. So all of these things had to be thought through thoroughly before they ever got into the crafting process. And today we can just, order stuff on Amazon and, put it all together. But I think that meditation process of thinking things out one step at a time and understanding how the transformations of the materials you're using are going to occur is, an essential part of the process that I think a lot of people are kind of overlooking for the quick successes. You have to understand how your materials are changing so that you can change the sort of materials within yourself as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? So you're talking about tools of alchemy, and I'll ask a question, see what everybody's opinion is. What is the difference? Let's say we've got our 4 tools of witchcraft, right? That are like the stereotypical tools that you see in the tarot cards: the wand, the pentacle, the chalice, and the sword. Okay. So what separates the magical tool of the sword from another sword? Or let's make it the athame, okay? A knife. What separates the witch's magical knife from the knife in your kitchen that you're going to prepare dinner with?
The process, the methodology that you use it for. So a lot of witches I've noticed have, wrapped them up in special, sacred cloths, as well as storing them in a sacred location within the house. And there's a symbolic methodology by which that they use to unsheath it. So all of these things come down to the process and the symbols of the process, I believe.
Yeah.
Also, they're consecrated for a specific purpose. Like you have the athame that stays upon your altar that's not allowed to be used for cutting. And then you have the bowline, which is used for cutting herbs and stuff like that as well. And the kitchen knife could be used for anything at that point.
And so when you say they're consecrated, when you consecrate something at the core, like what is that process? What are you doing to it?
I did that to all my magical tools. I consecrated everything.
You're making it purposeful for that specific magical duty, whatever it's you signified it for doing. And whenever it's used, it's supposed to be sacred to that task.
Yeah, and I think that's the key word that I look for is making it sacred, right? So regardless of, maybe you wrap it in a silk cloth, maybe you keep it in a special bag, maybe you have whisked it through smoke and fire and salt and water, but ultimately in your mind you're making it sacred and you're setting it aside for a spiritual task. So when you talk about the tools of alchemy and undergoing these processes and a methodology, we do have to keep that mindset in mind, because in order for any of this to work or to be effective, we have to keep the tools sacred in our mind somehow. And that's a really weird thing to do. And in order to be able to do that, we have formed these weird ritual things we do, like wrapping something in silk or like putting it in a special place or keeping it on an altar, because that helps our mind adjust to that spiritual thing that we're trying to do.
Yeah, I remember even doing that. I think I even I guess I wasn't the only person mind fucking the idea. I think it was in a David Shoemaker's book, Living Thelema. At one point, I was like, well, if I go to banish when I'm done, when my talisman's still in the circle, don't I just fuck it all up now? And he suggested supposedly, like you said, a black silk cloth to wrap it in. Yeah. But yeah, that's interesting what you said. Like the dagger that I had, or Athame, what do you want to call it? I never use it except for just ritual work. And I did consecrate it, I whatever used holy water or whatever, salt and water and all that stuff. I put it over certain incense. Yeah. So it's kind of cool hearing other people talk about that. It brings back memories. It's been a while.
Well, it separates the sacred from the profane, right? So you're making a contract with yourself and with the object. This is what it's going to be used for from here on forever. And so it's a very powerful thing if you put it in terms of eternity.
Yeah, I don't even like whenever I meet talismans, like this is how sometimes I would do it. Just as an example, let's say I was like doing something with Jupiter or Mercury. I'd probably like on the hour of Mercury in the morning, if I had the chance, depending on what my life was like, I would make the talisman and then I consecrate it, and then probably like on the hour of Mercury's later on Thursday, I would actually do it then. But I would make the talisman and I would consecrate that too. Like, and I wouldn't use it until afterwards. So. Headless, do you have any other questions?
Oh man, I got lots of them. So the wet path versus the dry path, which one have you sort of explored in your own life? Because I mean, I know a lot of controversy has popped up when it comes to alchemists about which is appropriate, which is not real. But which do you prefer personally?
Oh man, I don't know if I'm familiar with that terminology. Can you elucidate a little bit on that for me?
Right. Well, they talk about being able to take the minerals and the substances from the earth as being the sort of dry path. And then when you're talking about the wet path, you're talking about different types of energies imbuing into the water, different types of funguses and other sources to sort of bring about the powder that's used for the transformation. So the wet path is far more about the ambient energies in the universe, whereas the dry path is a little bit more physically based in the minerals themselves and how to manipulate those minerals, as opposed to using the energetic sources. So have you read about the gur, or the this sort of fungus that forms on the full moon? It's kind of interesting. I've found this when they talk about the wet path, usually that's what they're talking about, is this sort of full moon fungus that only forms on the dew in the morning time, right before the sun rises, that you have to sort of collect to sort of use your projection powder from that source. But it's the idea that you're multiplying the metals based upon these different materials used. And usually what you see is with the dry path, they're talking about this red metal or this red mercury substance. And with the dry path, they're talking about something that is actually imbued with the heavenly essences of the stars. I think the two of them, if you can get to the point where they can be useful, then they're both valid. But, usually somebody has something to say about one or the other. So.
Okay. I mean, like I come at it like from a much less literal standpoint, I think. And as much as I love reading about different experiments that people have done and different recipes and different like crazy alchemical texts and stuff like that, I find that hard to put into practice unless I am taking a symbolic look at it. So as far as I go with like the literal and practical alchemy would be making spagyrics and herbal solutions, right? But any further than that, I don't really have the equipment to do something like that, or the time or the energy. Like I feel like my purpose is to learn from it symbolically rather than, and that might change next year, 2 years, 5 years, who knows? But right now I feel like my purpose is more to apply the principles to the things that are around me rather than to like go try to make something into gold, I guess.
Well, I would recommend that people at least pursue the wet path because it's far cheaper and far less, I guess,
Always a
intrusive
plus.
in your life, right? Yeah. So basically, you're just collecting dew and then storing it in oak barrels, preferably if that oak tree has been struck by lightning, right? So the idea there is that the oak represents this sort of kingly energy. And when you store it in those barrels in a very dark location, you get this filmy substance they call the gur, right? Which then can be used in multiplication of metals and ultimately transformation if you inject that into the dry path. But I haven't gotten to that point yet. So just the dew and the awakening of the sun, I believe, are so much more powerful when it comes to conscious creation because our minds connect with the dawn on such a elemental level that it's really hard to put into words. Like, people don't go out there and view sunsets anymore. They don't go out there and view sunrises anymore. But at these points, you get a lot of spiritual energies from the changing of these environments based upon the light coming or going from the sun. So I think there's a liminal effect that I think a lot of people have sort of missed out on by not experiencing these different times of day as powerful transformational elements. I mean, for me, it's like I found personally, the dawn is like the breaking of the Orphic egg, right? This is like the very first light of the universe. It's almost a reflection of that. And so when you're out there experiencing that, you can kind of put yourself in the mindset of the primordial, the primeval, and actually feel the essence of creation itself. Whereas, our normal everyday life is about working and all the rest of this stuff. Very few people get up at dawn anymore, but actually having that experience and appreciating it for what it is, clearing out the sleep from your mind and actually getting out there and doing it really starts to have a transformational effect if you do it on a consistent basis.
So is the morning dew supposed to kind of be like the prima materia?
In this case, yeah, but it has to specifically be in the springtime, right? Like right around this time, you have to collect the dew from the spring and the fall at the morning light, because the morning light actually has an effect of damaging the body of the fungus that collects in this dew. So you've got to collect it before the light fully shows up, and it's got to be on a full moon in those time periods because it sort of collects that energy as well. So I think it's all about the liminality of these different states. You've got the full moon, which is like the apex of the energy from the moon. And then you've got the dawn, which is another one of these apex points coming from the sun. So all of these things can be collected, and, following that path of nature, you sort of can feel that resonance within yourself as it's happening. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I did have a question here from Howard. After yesterday, I can't ignore the guy. I don't know if everybody wants to answer this question. That's fine with me. What's the difference between consecrating an object and enchanting an object? It's about protection. For me, I guess consecrating a thing was like, I guess kind of to like, it was almost banishing anything off of that, I guess, making it pure. Enchanting an object for me in Magic, just for me, or whatever I was into, I've never really heard the word enchanted used. Protection, that would be more of an amulet. I don't know if you're looking for that too, but yeah, that's what I got. I don't know if Judith, if you want to answer that too. So I'm sure you have experience with this stuff.
For me, consecrating an object is for ritual purposes. Enchanting an object is actually part of a spell. If you are actually conducting a spell, that's what I consider enchanting an object. Is it about protection? Well, consecrating could be due to protection, in my opinion. Enchanting could be part of a protection spell. That's my take on it.
Thank you.
I look at it like the grooves on a record player, right? So when you're enchanting something, you're sort of putting the grooves on it and making it for that use specifically. So it's always for that thing. Whereas consecration, you can use that in multiple different enchantings, right? So you've used this specifically for that purpose. That's more like the needle, right? So the consecration is the needle, and then the enchanting would be more like the grooves that you're putting into the record.
Oh, I like that.
I actually like that one.
Yeah, right? That's pretty interesting. What about you, Eric? You got an idea of the?
Yeah, well, okay. I mean, I don't usually use the word enchanting in my practice, but I think the closest parallel I would use is charging. Right, we do charge things all the time, right?
Yeah.
So consecrating in my practice is a very particular process, and it involves making something sacred and binding it to a purpose. And like those are two very key factors in consecrating. So for me anyway, so like when you consecrate your tools, you bind your tools to the purpose of ritual, to set them aside from the normal things. When I'm charging something, that's like a step lower. I can charge anything. I could charge a crystal, just putting energy into it. I might charge my consecrated magical tools as well if I want to put a little bit more energy into them at any point. But that idea, like if I charged a crystal, I'm not necessarily saying that crystal is sacred. I'm just saying it has energy to do something. But when I consecrate my tool, I'm saying that the tool is sacred in my mind. And if something happens to it and it loses that sacredness, then like there's a problem and the magic's not going to work the way it should. I'm going to have to fix it.
That was great with the charging. Thank you for adding that in there. You got something, Judith? Go for it.
With talking about that, with that question, it brings up within your book for the fluid condensers, would it be viewed as a consecration or a charging?
For making the condenser, I mean, it depends on what we're going to do, because the way that I end up talking about fluid condensers is really like that there are condensers all around us. Okay, so like there's fluid condensers in our magical tools. There's fluid condensers in the spell ingredients that we use during a normal ritual, right? The talisman that you're talking about making, Nick, right? Or that you were talking about previously making. Those are maybe they're planetary metals, right? Like those are also fluid condensers. Like these are just things that conduct energy. So I actually forgot the question you just asked me. I hope it was starting to answer it. I was going somewhere with the with
you were cooking. Yeah, you were cooking.
It was basically asking, is it like a charging, but of the fluid, or?
Yeah. Okay. So the reason I was trying to explain that there is just so big of a variety of different things that we would apply condensers to. So depending on what type of object we're talking about would determine whether I'm consecrating it or just charging it. But in general, I would say most of the time you are just charging it, but the process of charging is really, really important to the condenser making process. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about at first believing that it was more of a physical process and that there wasn't a lot of energetic work that's required. But then finding out that it's really entirely energetic. And so when you make the fluid condenser, and yeah, it feels like you're just boiling herbs or something like that. It feels like you're doing a really simple physical process. But you have to take that and you have to charge it with the type of energy that you want it to conduct for you, and the type of things that you want it to represent symbolically. And that's a charging, I would say, not so much of a consecration.
Well, I've known a lot. They have the pelicans, right, in the traditional magical work, but there's also the I forgot the reverberator, right? The reverberating flask, which has the two arms like this. So it's just a bottle where they've got the top sealed off and you've got your material in there and it's reverberating between those two handles on the side, or the two tubes on the side. And basically it's the constant process of going through the different phases of matter, you know, the solid, the liquid, and the vapor, in that constant reverberation process that is charging the entire material over and over again as it follows the same path over again. So it's there's a charging in itself. As you're heating something up, you're putting energy into the system. Those molecules are flying all over the place, becoming more charged, going up to the top, coming back down, and then becoming infused again with the essences that you're trying to imbue into them. So it's like a physical manifestation of the energetic or emotional body that you should be putting into that system as well. So it goes along with, you know, what kind of energetic fire are you putting into your material as it's going through the reverberation process.
Another question I did want to ask you real quick. I kind of like left it out with the planetary stuff. Did you ever apply deities to your stuff at all?
Yeah, but like that's very specific to me and my practice, and I don't think like it needs to be that way for everybody. And so I think there are, because we have this idea of gold, and gold is traditionally associated with the sun. I think that there are a lot of solar deities that can be used here. Like, I mean, personally, for me, it's Apollo, but like it could be Lu or Bridget or Helios or like any of these sun-related deities from any pantheon at any point. And I just, if you incorporate the energy of deity for working as you normally would, like it can just kind of take it to another level, if that makes sense.
Personification. It allows, I think, again, we've got all these different names for the sun god, but it's within those specific personifications that you find that soul, right? And so as you're calling out the names of these different gods, what you find is that you get a different essence from the same source. And they call the gold sort of the flesh of the gods. So it's the incorruptible. It's the thing that cannot be changed. So there are essences and hypostasises that come from these different gods that I think a lot of people sort of pass over when, you know, we're mortals. We have to think as mortals. So how we connect to these different energies and on what hypostasis we choose, that really gives us a different flavor, a different soul for the process that we're going through.
I do have a question about your book.
Mhm.
Within your book, what information or what guides do you give us to delve into alchemy? Whether is it like beginners, intermediate, to deal with the fluid condensers?
So there's a very, I mean, it's one of the longer chapters in the book is on alchemy, and it kind of starts at the very beginning. It breaks down the practice from what it was historically to how we can apply it today. So it is geared at someone whose only encounter with alchemy is going to be reading that chapter of the book. Okay. I expect there to be no prerequisite knowledge. And if it's something that you find is super interesting, then maybe you go read something else on it. But it's one chapter, and it just explains where it comes from and what principles are involved and how we're going to use it in terms of making fluid condensers.
I did want to ask you. I want to ask you another question, kind of. I'm sure there's probably more than one. There, things that you'd like people to take away from this book. But if someone could take away one thing from your book, what would you like it to be?
I like that question. I would like it to be a different way of looking at everything around us. And instead of just looking at things in this mundane physical way, to look at them for their energetic qualities and how they could assist us in conducting different types of energies that we're trying to put out into the universe.
Well said, sir. Hellas, were you going to say something before I started? For some reason, I thought you might have leaned forward to go talk. My bad. Just wanted to make sure. Judith, you got something to say?
I do have a question.
Go for it.
Because when it comes to the fluid condenser, you talk about a lot of herbs. Was Scott Cunningham a big influence with you going down this path?
I mean, Scott Cunningham's Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner was probably one of the first books that I read, because that's like
a
seven out of 10 people who practice witchcraft today will tell you that. Just like, it's such a popular book. So yeah, but that's not really ever my go-to source for anything. If that makes sense. It was kind of a helpful introduction for me to get started on this path, but it's not necessarily a place that I return to often.
Nice.
I brought a Soxolite if you guys want to go through the different processes, because I think the most accessible way of getting the tools ready for doing a condensation work would be using a Soxolite extractor, because you just buy it from China pretty easily. But I think a lot of people are intimidated by the idea that this is something that they should know how to use, when really it's designed for the beginner to understand. So in here, you would have the thimble, right, which would be your material that you're trying to bring the material out of, whether you're using alcohol. I just did a recent condensation using sulfuric, what is it called? Oh, I forgot the name of it. Sulfoxide. It's interesting stuff. It comes from a tree that's really permeable through a lot of different sources. But I thought, well, this has a higher evaporation temperature, so I've got to use something a little bit more for it. So anyways, you put that in here. The alcohol is stored in this right here. This is where you're going to get your finished material, right, as well as what you're starting with. So you're going to fill this up with however much alcohol you think is needed for doing the extraction. And then this goes at the bottom of this right here. And as you heat this up here at the bottom, right, the alcohol evaporates, comes up through these tubes, and then starts to go through the material that you've got inside of your thimble right here, right? And then this tube right here is kind of like the loop of Henle inside of your kidneys, right? So once this fills up, it all empties back down into this container here. So you've got the material and the final product being separated by, a network of tubes. That means that the two don't contaminate, so you don't have to filter through any of your alcohol once you're done with it. But the whole thing is sort of brought together by this one right here, this coil, right? So this coil is what you're going to fill up with cold water, which causes all of that alcohol to stay within the loop. So this is your vaporizer. This is the thing that's going to keep all of your alcohol from escaping out of the top. Now, from this top point right here, you can actually provide some suction or a vacuum so that you can actually evaporate your alcohol at a much lower temperature and not damage any of your material, because a lot of herbs have different temperatures that they can be boiled at before they start breaking down and having problems like that. So you could actually provide a vacuum to where the entire system is pressurized so that it can boil at a much lower temperature. So that process right there would be kind of like the process where we are, both salt, sulfur, and all salt, sulfur, and mercury. And basically, as we're heated or we're given tests in life, what comes out of that process is essentially who we are. So the entire thing is sort of a reflection of the spiritual journey that we're on as mortals. And I think a lot of people, sort of get hung up on too much of thinking about how this is going to bring them gold and not actually seeing that the process themselves is making them into a golden sort of substance, something that is less corruptible by understanding the processes of nature itself. I thought I'd throw that in.
Eric, when you were describing making it, was that what you were speaking about? Because I remember talking about this, asking about the distilling process, and it looks like
everything that I talk about doing in the book with fluid condensers, you can literally do in your kitchen with a pot and a pan and some cheesecloth and maybe like a mesh strainer. You don't have to have any of the fancier laboratory chemistry alchemy equipment, because what I'm focusing on mostly in the book is to try to get you to understand the spiritual principles and the energetic qualities that are being transformed. And I think the chemistry equipment is awesome. I would love to have some one day, but it's not required for anything that I talk about in the book.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned that earlier. Judith, do you have anything else? I was going to ask you another question.
I was going to ask, and
I
I don't mean
I didn't
to,
realize. Sorry about that.
I was going to ask, but I didn't mean to. I don't mean to downplay it, and I think Eric will get this. It's like alchemy for the witch, the kitchen witch.
Yeah. Yeah, of course it is, man. Everything we do can be thought of as alchemy. It's about transformation and refinement and the raising of vibrations. And it is to take one thing and make it into a new thing. And like, I know this, like, sorry to all the traditional alchemists out there who might be offended by this statement, but like when you cook something in the kitchen, like if you're doing it with intention, you have turned ingredients, you have taken a substance and turned it into a new substance, of refined substance. You've done it with intention. Hopefully, like you said, grandma's food tastes better because she cooks with love. Hopefully you made that food with love. You made it into something else. That's alchemy.
I actually, that was a question I did have for you, because I did bring up brewing and distilling, and I was going to ask you, is cooking and you could almost go to the creation of teas being that way, and I could see that being with your background being in Wicca, because I do have a little bit of a Wiccan background. Everything we do is viewed as part of alchemy. We weren't exactly taught, okay, you're going to turn lead into gold, but you can transform anything into whatever end purpose you want to.
If you think about the transitional phase when you're cooking, right? So you're changing one substance into something else, right? That transitional phase makes it easier to imprint your intentions on, because now it's not only imprinted from the stuff that it came from before, it's now imprinted with what you're putting into it. And it's all about that transitional phase, in my opinion, that you're able to put more of your intention and all the rest of that stuff into it, is because you're making something new out of something else.
Technically, along that line, you would view as a chef as a high tier alchemist in that view.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that, you're talking about that transition, and this is why the purity of mind and intention was so important, because you are imprinting onto the thing whatever you are resonating with energetically. So like, to go with your example there of the chef being the head alchemist, the chef with with bad energy is like a sick chef, like who is infecting the food with some sort of contagious virus or disease, right? So you
You know how
don't
many
want
chefs
that.
are alcoholics too? Think about that. Fuck.
Right. Well,
That just crossed my mind.
every kitchen is kind of like an army, right? Like when you're in the high end kitchens where you've got this head chef and all these different people at their stations doing their thing, they all have to be sort of, and that's a lot of pressure, you know. I mean, especially if it's a very good restaurant. So it's gonna take its toll on your own energy if you're not putting something back into the system, and you're gonna fill that up with something else. So a lot of that has to do with self-care. A lot of times people are so devoted to their jobs and the things that they're doing that they're not really even paying attention to what they're giving out and what they're taking back.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Does anybody have any other questions? I have one more before we wrap it up for me. All right. What do you think is a simple condenser goal that would be appropriate for a beginner? You know, protection, clarity, confidence, you know, something along those lines or whatever.
It's not necessarily about having one of those intentions specifically, right?
Yeah, no, I was just throwing out
protection, clarity. Yeah. But it is about enhancing whatever intention you do have. So like one of a really simple thing to do would be to make a fluid condenser and then use that condenser when you anoint a petition paper, right? So petition paper being like a little piece of parchment or something that you write an intention on and then you go and you burn. Like this is a typical witchcraft thing that we do, right? We write shit on paper and we light it on fire. You want to enhance that a little bit. You take some fluid condenser and you dab the corners of the petition paper and then you hold it and you charge it with the intention. And the thought is that the fluid condenser, since it's so receptive to energy, it's going to take that intention more so than just the paper by itself would have. Plus, it feels cooler.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, I like that. Thank you very much for that. Then I guess the last thing, you know, where can people follow your work? And again, I'm sorry to ask, when does Fluid Condensers drop? When does it come out? I know it's a pre-order now, but
yeah, it's pre-order right now on Amazon and through CrossCrow. The official release date is March 31st, so we're just a few weeks away from the release date. And if you are looking to catch me online, you can go to my website, AerikArkadian.com. You can go to @AerikArkadian on pretty much any social media. You can find my Patreon page if you want to connect with me that way. And you can also find my show, Music, Myth, and Magic, where I reach out to other authors and members of the occult community, and we have conversations kind of like this. So
nice.
Lots of pretty much, if you type my name, you will find me.
That's great. Definitely want to get you back on. There's a few other things that I've noticed. Yeah, I would like the Wicca. And I had a couple of questions that I wanted to ask you about, because I know you're into music, sound and stuff like that, or music. And I was like, that could be a whole other topic technically.
Oh yeah.
So,
yeah, we can
I didn't know. I was like, we can get lost in that. So definitely. I had a really good time, man. I really, really did. Great guest. I'm so happy that the book company sent you to me.
Yeah, this was fun, man.
Yeah, no, hell yeah, it definitely was. Before we wrap it up, Judith, the Loon, do you want to let everybody know where they can find all your amazing work as well?
Aerik, thank you. It was nice to get the viewpoint from a Wiccan on alchemy. Granted, I have to admit I was always shied away from it, but you've actually intrigued me into actually possibly delving into that. So I probably will pre-order your book, and I could be found once again on YouTube and X, formerly known as Twitter, as The Loon. And thank you again, Cardinal Nick, for having me on.
Of course. Thank you for coming on, Judith. And Headless Giant, he made it. What is going on, sir?
You can find me on X and on Instagram, also on YouTube at The Headless Giant. So you can look at my old shows with the Alchemy Mondays, and I did a little bit of DMSO experiments on film there, so that you can check those out. And so usually tonight we're doing 777, but this was a very special treat. So thank you for having me on.
No, of course. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. If other people listening to this and they're into that stuff, go check out his stuff over there. He did that for probably about 2 months, right? Or a few months.
Yep.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. The guy was telling me he was ordering equipment and he had all this shit set up. Thought the guy was making tea or some shit. That's about all Eros did, right? She made a cup of tea.
Right.
Joke. I have no idea. I didn't watch all of them. I'm just being a bullbuster. Thank you for coming on, man. I really, really appreciate it. Again, Aerik, that was really a blast. I really enjoyed having you on, man. I really like your point of view on things. It was pretty interesting. And I really hope to get you back on. But again, thank you. And thank your book company for suggesting you. I had a blast. And everybody in the chat, that's what's up. I appreciate everybody in there. Thank you for the questions. I always appreciate it. If I catch them, I will ask them. So don't feel bad asking questions. I just got to pay attention to the guests and the chat. So, cut me some slack. But until the next one, everybody be well. Later.